Welcome back to the Business of Biotech. I'm your host, Ben Comer, Chief Editor at Life Science Leader, and today I'm speaking with Thomas von Erlach, Ph.D., co-founder and CEO at Vivtex, a company he co-founded with MIT's Dr. Robert Langer, which is focused on developing orally available biologics as opposed to injected therapies or IV administration through the use of what Dr. Langer has described as a gastrointestinal tract on a chip. Thomas was a postdoc in the Langer lab and helped invent the Vivtex platform, and he has experience with biopharma industry co-development partnerships, which we'll talk about. Vivtex very recently announced a partnership with Novo Nordisk worth up to $2.1 billion and has secured several other pharma partnerships. We'll talk about working in the Langer lab and Vivtex company formation, securing funding, establishing industry partnerships, and negotiating licensing deals, and we'll get an overview of Vivtex technology platform and what it might mean for patients. Thank you so much for being here, Thomas.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Ben.
I wanted to start out with Dr. Bob Langer. He's a legend in biotechnology, and I also want to give a shout out to my colleague Ray Dogum at Drug Discovery Online, who spoke with Dr. Langer a couple of months ago and published a video conversation of that meeting. You can find it on the Drug Discovery Online website, and maybe as an added incentive, I'll just say there's a pretty nifty sleight of hand card trick involved in that video as well, so check that out. But Thomas, I'm interested in what your experiences were like working in the Langer lab as a postdoc. And maybe, first of all, how did you get in? And second, was it about what you expected?
Yeah, great question. I did my PhD in tissue engineering at Imperial College in the lab of Molly Stevens. And I don't know if you know this, but Molly Stevens is a pretty well-known professor in tissue engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And other fields. And she was a postdoc in Bob Langer's lab a long time ago, so she knows Bob very well. And after my PhD, when I was thinking, what should I do with my life? What should I do next? She proposed that I would go over there as a postdoc, and honestly, that sounded pretty nice to me. That sounded pretty good, so that's what I did. And when I came over to Bob's lab, I think like many other members of his lab, I came with a very specific background, but not really with a very specific idea what I'm going to do there. And I think that's really kind of a unique feature of Bob's lab, that you have a lot of talented scientists that come from different fields that join his lab. And he really has a fantastic ability to kind of steer everyone, including myself, towards big problems to solve. And I think that is really something. When I came with my background, I had a certain background in advanced cell model systems. That's really what I've been focusing my research on. And naturally, I was just kind of trying to do something very similar to what I've been doing during my PhD. And I think through his guidance, I think he really steered me towards something much bigger. And I think that's really, in general, his philosophy, that you should really focus on solving a big problem that might be a little bit riskier. It's not like an incremental improvement, but something that really, if you're successful, would have a really big impact. And something also kind of unique to maybe other academic labs out there is that impact should really be something that is not just academic and sort of more research in nature, but really something that ultimately benefits society and patients in some direct way. So over my time there, when I joined his lab, I got to received that direction, meet a lot of talented scientists that I worked together. One of the key individuals that really helped me throughout my career, besides Bob Langer, is Giovanni Traverso. He's another MIT professor now at but he's also GI doc, and together we decided to tackle the challenge to come up with a new more physiologically relevant GI model system. And that to me, was not obvious before I joined this lab, but really now in hindsight, I think was a very, very good problem to focus on. Yeah.
Yeah, and what circumstances led to the actual founding of Vivtex? I mean, at what point did you know, that you had created something now, you had gotten something to a point where it could serve as the basis of a new company?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think when we started to build our technology, I think at some point, I mean, it took us years, but at some point I got pretty excited about the results. Um, and I remember a meeting I had with Bob, where basically presented everything, and he told me, the biggest issue that I see with those type of technologies is that people don't validate it enough.
Hmm.
And I think that really resonated with me because in academia, that's not really per se your primary motivator. The motivator is to get a publication out. And of course, one would expect that, you want to have some degree of robust data that you're showing in your publication. But it's a difference between that and, really extensively validating a new assay for potential industry use. And he really provided that key feedback. And that was something that we decided to do initially, just a few experiments. And then that added another few years on top because it took a long time to go through that validation stage. But I think it was absolutely key. And after we got some exciting in vivo data, not just showing the predictability of the assay, but really kind of going through the whole motion of actually applying it for the application we are after, which is really all biologics delivery. If we went through when we went through that whole motion of using our assay and identifying new hits and then validating these in large animal, that was really the key trigger for us to decide, now I think this technology is ready to be spun out.
Okay. Okay. And you, I think, began as chief scientific officer and then became CEO. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. For now, a number of years, I've been the CSO. I think, if we look at our journey, I could say that we really have focused a lot on further building out the scientific platform and the science in general. And that really was absolutely key for me to focus on. I think we're in a really exciting stage, and I'm very, very excited that I was able to step up as the CEO now.
Yeah, well, I wanted you to see well, I was curious about what you might say about that transition, how your role at the company changed. You're clearly deeply involved in the science, but I suspect you've had to, in some ways, relinquish that a little bit to take on the day-to-day experience and operations of being the CEO of a biotech company. Is there anything that you would say about that? Anything you learned in that process?
Yeah, yeah, I think that what really helps me right now is that we made the decision that we also hire an experienced finance and operations person, so that Her name is Lena Fisher, very, very talented and really able to cover a lot of, the aspects that one really has to deal with running a company. And, I think that to me feels like a very, very good match that I can spend my time further trying to move the business along, try to really, thanks to perhaps some of the deep technical insights I managed to kind of gain over the years. I feel like it really helps me in the day-to-day business to move to direct the company and the science we do in hopefully the right direction. Work with our existing and potential future partners. So that part I feel like really is something that I can focus on and really leverage my existing expertise. But when it comes to non R&D operations or financials, I think what I mean that trying to learn how all this works, I can really recommend to just hire someone really experienced and knows how to do this. Really, really helps to hopefully grow the company in the right direction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I often hear from CEO, non-scientist CEOs that are working with scientists about how difficult and costly it can be to translate a new technology. It's usually described to me as going from a science experiment to a regulated CMC and GMP environment. And I'm so is there anything that I guess you would say, and you referenced the couple of years of, doing work on top of the experiments, which I suspect is part of that was working that out. But where did your initial funding come from to kind of get the company going?
Yeah, so we had some initial investors that I think over the years were mostly in the private individual front
Hmm.
initially, and some institutionals. So that's really where kind of got us started. I think relative to perhaps other biotech startups out there, what we managed to do fairly early on that's kind of maybe a bit unique is that we managed to get some initial pharma collaborations, and by now we have about 10 pharma partners we've been working with over the years, and that really provided us with a good amount of non-dilutive revenue over the years. Actually, to a point now where we are, you could look at us as a profitable company where revenue positive. So our sort of need and reliance on investors relative to perhaps other biotech startups wasn't as much.
Well, that is quite an accomplishment. I can say that straight off. I wonder, and you mentioned 10 pharma partnerships, which is significant for any small biotech startup. I'm always curious about companies that are operating in stealth mode, and I've asked other folks about this, and I'd just be curious to get your answer about, maybe what you might say about the reasons for kind of keeping a low profile in this early stage of the company, and what the benefits of that are.
Yeah. I don't know how it would have been if we tried not to keep such a low profile. Maybe, we would have been off a lot better by now. I don't know. But no, I think the reasoning around it from at least our perspective has really been that we had this feeling that we need time to really figure out the technology and the exact application. Um, so I think we obviously knew what our technology was, and that hasn't changed that much over the years. I mean, really just try to build it out further and really kind of make that leap from the scientific sort of build out to actually being able to create drug products that our partners can move forward. So that was really our focus. But I guess when it comes to how exactly we would do that and what exactly we ultimately are able to come up with and provide to our partners, I think we always felt that as long as we haven't really nailed that, it's just not written in stone. So we wanted to kind of allow ourselves a little bit of a sort of time window during which we really focus on figuring all this out before we try to increase our profile a little better. Because by now, I would say, thanks to having now been able to accomplish a bit of that leap from the scientific build to now creating products, we have a much better sense of what we can actually offer to potential pharma partners, and but actually also we can do as a company. So it's a lot easier for us now to go out and actually tell people what we are doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You wanted to kind of iron out some of the details of the technology and the offering before, making a big splash on the market and then potentially having to backtrack or something if you change directions, which is a common outcome for, all sorts of discovery and development programs. Let's next talk a little bit about partnerships. You've announced a partnership with Novo Nordisk. I mentioned it in the introduction, worth up to $2.1 billion to develop next generation oral biologic medicines for obesity and diabetes and other associated comorbidities. How did that partnership happen?
Yeah, that wasn't something that happened overnight. That's for sure, as you probably would have guessed. So it's really, I think if we go back in time, I think we could go back many years. I would really point to Bob Langer's and Chia Traverse's academic relationship they have with Novo. So that thanks to that relationship, when we started Vivtex, we already knew the key scientific people at Novo that really work in the field of oral peptide delivery. And I think throughout the journey we've been having at Vivtex, we kept a very close scientific relationship with those people. And I think what really happened through that is, I would say, maybe a mutual trust, scientific trust that has built that helped when we essentially reached a point where we were really excited about essentially more not just the platform, but the products we've built, the delivery systems we created. I think that was something that then Novo has really paid attention to very quickly. And then after obviously a very extensive due diligence, ultimately they have then entered a partnership with us. But yeah, that was really years and years of existing relationship, I would say.
Yeah, and you talk about building trust. Is that accomplished through, just communicating results about things, being just actively engaged with folks over there, sharing things back and forth? How would you describe, that process of building trust?
Yeah, I think that for the most part, at least that's what happened in our case. We call it a 7 year overnight success, if you will, with the products with those delivery systems we now managed to create. And I think in some ways that journey that we had to really work towards where we are now, I think we always kept somewhat of close ties with the scientific community. We always presented in conferences and essentially just laid out our scientific progress, our failures too, the things we've learned over the years. And I think for someone to have observed us for period of time and looked at the progression and progress we've made, I think it's easier to gain that kind of trust as someone that you don't know is knocking at your door and basically saying, I have this great delivery system that I just came up with. Despite that might be holding up just fine, but unfortunately in our field at least, there's just a lot of there are a lot of activities, and the field has been plagued with a lot of failures. So people are very, very cautious, and I think there's a general appreciation about us just trying something new that by now took about 10 years of work back at MIT and then at Vivtex, and I guess seeing all that work and data and the ups and downs that went into that just gives people some confidence in I think the technology. We also try not to overstate. We have a very scientific approach to our partners. We're not really overly eager to just go and partner with just everyone. We don't try to overstate, because ultimately it's just as important to deliver on a partnership than to get the partnership in the first place. Arguably, it's actually even more important because you don't want to gain a bad reputation of not having, your technology not really working out. So I think it's really important to just be honest and upfront about what we know and what we don't know, what we think we can do and what we think we cannot do. When we enter into a collaboration.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned, I think, 10 total partnerships. Are there any others that you could talk a little bit about or just kind of explain?
Yeah, I'm happy to. For the most part, we are unable to disclose specific names, but we have one of our partnerships. We're quite we are quite far ahead with the progress we've been able to make with that one. So we actually just dosed our drug product, our formulation we created in phase 1 just a few weeks ago. So very happy about that big milestone for us to have leaped from just the scientific concept to now something that is dosed in humans. That was something that made everyone, including myself, Vivtex, very, very happy. And we do have a number of additional preclinical candidates that we hope will be dosed some point later this year in humans as well. So in terms of that, that's essentially giving you maybe an idea on the stage of those different programs. In terms of the nature of the programs, we do see a lot of interest besides the metabolic diseases. We see a lot of interest in the autoimmune disease space. Basically, I guess both of these large disease spaces have in common, obviously, an enormous market, but also chronic dosing. So we do see a lot of interest in those areas where one has to really the patients have to really be dosed on a chronic basis, because obviously our focus and contribution is to be able to provide patients with the opportunity to have an oral alternative as opposed to an injectable. So someone that has to take this on an ongoing basis is obviously a lot more appreciative about the option of having an oral versus someone that just has to take it for a week or two for certain indications. So that's basically where we see a lot of the current activities and interest from our existing and potential partners. There are also some orphan indications, or I guess the dosing frequency and perhaps in some cases even the age of the patients, so meaning they have to take it as a very young age, is an issue, and an oral will be adding a lot of quality of life to those individuals.
Yeah, right. Okay. And I saw the Novo Nordisk partnership press release, and let me know if I'm reading this right. It sounds like you are licensing the technology that Novo Nordisk will then essentially put into production, will do the development work on their side, or if that's not correct, can you give me a sense of what both company, like what Vivtex is doing and what Novo Nordisk is doing through this partnership?
Yeah, you captured it exactly the way it's laid out. So we have essentially, as when we look at our technology at Vivtex, what we have there is essentially this tissue level, this GI tissue level high throughput screening system, and that we have over the years paired up with computational simulation capability. So to really do molecular dynamic simulations and really kind of further shed light on the interactions and mechanisms that take place. And then obviously also just based on the vast amount of data we are generating, we are also using predictive models and AI to further accelerate our ability to identify the best possible formulation. The thing over the years, what we have managed to do also is create a portfolio of existing drug delivery technologies that we can use basically kind of as sort of existing off-the-shelf type solutions, if you will. And I think that taken together is what we can offer Novo Nordisk under this licensing agreement. So the ability to access our existing formulation technologies that we have created, but also the opportunity to, through our screening and computational and AI capabilities, identify new formulations for them. And as you were correctly saying, Novo Nordisk will then be responsible for the development and commercialization of these.
Okay, I see. I know that there are listeners of the Business of Biotech who would absolutely love to license their technology to a company like Novo or another big pharmaceutical company. And I was wondering, Thomas, what you might say about that licensing process in terms of how you as Vivtex evaluate your potential partner and how you ensure that you're getting, the value of what you're licensing from your partner. Is there anything you could say about that kind of negotiation process or how you think about it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think for Vivtex and perhaps other listeners, if you're the small biotech a party and you're negotiating with a big pharma, it's not per se exactly eye to eye what
Yeah,
you
right,
say.
right.
So I would say though, based on this transaction and also other experiences we've been having, I think there's a certain degree of the pharma partner being reasonable in the overall terms. And I think for the most part, if we look at Novo Nordisk, I mean, we are really looking at a company that has been in this space for 30 years and really been, for the most part, also pioneering the oral peptide delivery.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think we're looking at a company that has extensive amount of experience when it comes to deal terms in that exact space. So we didn't really feel like there was a lot of there was a huge amount of misalignment. I think it perhaps also comes down to the question, what are you expecting as a company? So maybe more managing the expectation of the biotech startup. What really are you expecting? I think we came in with a fairly open mind when we started Vivtex. I think, there are analogs, there are comparables that one can pull, which obviously help guide you. But ultimately, what you really end up, I think what I would trust the most is just the actual market data that you're receiving when you talk to different pharma companies or biotech companies, and they put a term sheet on the table and you start negotiating, and you end up making a deal or not making a deal. Sometimes you have multiple term sheets and you're able to get a good sense what is the market really willing to pay here. And it's obviously always the usual dance around, um, front-loaded versus back-loaded, and all these things that, royalties, no royalties, and all these, aspects that, I guess just need to be negotiated. But, I would like to think that it's not per se, I mean, there's a certain, I guess, bandwidth that I think we've been learning over the years that, I think is reasonable. And I think it has yet to be determined when we move forward. We are further building out our platform, how things could look in the future. Our hope and expectation is that you have a direct correlation between the value you can provide to a partner versus what you will ultimately receiving.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you're involved in 10 different partnerships. Are there any and I'm just thinking of other leaders, CEOs that might be listening, any kind of additional tips or even red flags that you might look for in, those initial potential partnership discussions?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it is challenging to partner while you're still building the plane, while you're
Yeah.
flying, I would say. And I think, in a perfect world, you could say, oh, I'm just gonna completely build out my platform to the last T, and then I'm gonna partner. But the reality is also you really need to get not just input from a consultant or someone, that has a specific expertise. You really need to live through some of these partnerships to also actively tailor and tweak your platform the right way. So it's a little bit of a dance, I would say, in this initial phase. Um, but it is really, really important that, that maybe I would say everyone is sort of aware that, what the platform can really do. Because I think oftentimes there's a tendency, especially if you feel if our partners, potential partners, I think in general would say, feel extremely excited about a new technology. I think one has maybe yet to really understand what can this technology really do. And typically, if people are excited, you tend to hope and assume it can do X, Y, and Z. And at some point, reality kicks in, and you might realize, well, it's maybe not quite that, but you can do something else. And I think it's maybe just important not to go too fast in the application front, but you need some degree of input, and having lived through trying to work towards the application to also kind of feed that back into the platform design. So it's a bit of a paradox, I feel. And I guess when it comes to looking back and trying to, think what might be good advice moving forward, I would say maybe it's good not to overdo it with the number of partners in the beginning, because you kind of need to pick your battles. And if you're still having to figure out a lot of aspects of your platform, I think it's good to have a real good partner that can really help you to ensure that whatever you're doing is somewhat then ultimately serving the partner's interest. But yeah, I would maybe not go into 10 right off the bat. That I
Right.
would maybe say. Yeah, yeah.
Well, we haven't talked about the actual technology yet, and without, going too deep scientifically, Thomas, I wonder if you could just give an overview of how it works and maybe how it's different from other technologies that have been used to make large molecules or peptide therapies orally available.
Yeah, yeah, happy to. Um, I think the the difference really between what we do versus what, let's say, other drug delivery technologies are doing is that we really don't consider ourselves to be a drug delivery company. In that sense, when we talk about potential competitors, or when people ask what are your competitors, I don't really think that we have any, because we really look at our technology as a technology that is somewhat drug delivery agnostic. So we are just having another approach that basically has a scientific, a sort of a technology foundation that is used to create a new drug delivery product for a specific API, that hopefully then really works out much better than anything else out there. And I think a lot of existing approaches, they basically focus directly on the product, the drug delivery system. So essentially coming up with a specific drug delivery technology and using that. And we're really more of a technology platform company. And currently you're using our technology to create new drug delivery systems. But I don't, we don't really have an interest to just stop there. We also see the possibility that we can use our technology to also engineer and modify drugs to be more amenable to be delivered orally, sort of a next sort of future application. So yeah, so that's basically just all around how we position us as a company relative to the drug delivery technologies out there. Now, going back to question, how is our technology actually working? So that really kind of gets us all the way back to our early days at MIT, where we discussed all this and sort of decided to come up with this system in the first place. That was essentially all motivated by the sort of general feeling that I think when we look at the gastrointestinal tract, and from my background, from like looking at different tissues as a tissue engineer, I think you really become to appreciate the complexity that we have on a tissue level. And the GI tract is an extremely fascinating, complex organ.
Yeah.
So we don't just have a sort of a monolayer of cells sitting there that you sometimes try people have used to have capture the intestinal tract in vitro, but instead you really have a very, very complex architecture, of a very complex mucus layer, very complex environments present. And I think over evolution, our gastrointestinal tract has become exquisite to ensure that only the chemicals that the body wants to absorb are being absorbed. So if there's a chemical that the GI tract doesn't want to have absorbed, it really makes sure that that doesn't happen. So those barriers that the GI tract has created over evolution are extremely sophisticated and complex. And we really felt that to be able to overcome these barriers, we need to capture the entire complexity of them and find a way how we can do this in a high throughput fashion, so that we can essentially empirically test in a very systematic fashion how we can possibly overcome these barriers. And the way we decided to do this is that we essentially went back, almost century by now, with people have done even before cell culture, which is they took ex vivo, they cultured ex vivo tissue explants. So we thought, well, that in that type of method is actually very well suited for us being able to capture the entire complexity of the tissue. So we just had to figure out ways and methods to maintain the viability of the tissue for some degree of time outside the animal, and obviously characterize all this. And then most importantly, also come up with a device that enables us um, to use the GI tissue we are culturing for high throughput screening experiments. So basically create a device that enables us to do that, then also work with existing robotics equipment. So that enables us then in essence to create tissues in a sort of normal, you could say, microplate format. So what is currently being used for any sort of high throughput screening experiments. So we've purposely designed to kind of meet those standards. And by doing so, we're really able then to use this in a very high throughput. So that's really the core technology that we've built at MIT that works with any GI segment, so from esophagus all the way down to rectum. So it then really allows us to model exactly what happens in the different GI compartments. And over the years now, we've been able to add to this mostly on a computational level, and also make the leap from what we actually didn't see in our screening ex vivo tissue screening platform, where we actually see in those wells that we are testing, how is that actually then going to translate into getting into a solid dosage formulation as a tablet and capsule? How can we make that jump? And that's something that we've also spent a number of years in to really figure out how can we really create a commercially and clinically viable solid dosage formulation based on those screening hits, being able to create that connection. And the answer is a lot of data and computational tools really help us to streamline that process.
So when you're partnering with a company, Novo or someone else, are you actually they're accessing your technology where it exists at MIT, and then you're providing them back with the results, or are they actually bringing technology over to their company?
We are trying to keep everything in-house as much as possible. And I
Okay.
think the learning we've been having over the years is that I think the nature of a small company, when your existence really depends on making the technology work, you really are able to have a very efficient and hardworking team that really tries to find the fastest way possible to move the program forward. So we've seen that part of our, I guess, strength, that if you will, that we've sort of seen over the years is that we encounter issues like everyone else, but I think we just really try, because our existence depends on it, to really try to solve them as fast as possible. So if we have to rely on partners or CROs, typically they're just not able to match our pace.
Okay.
So that's why we have decided to keep everything in-house. So the actual assets of all the analysis, which is taking up a lot of the overall resources and effort, and then also the actual solid dosage prototyping and all the studies, the validation studies.
What do you think are your biggest challenges, the biggest challenges that you face, Thomas? What keeps you up at night?
Yeah. Um, Right now, I think we're doing. Fortunately, we're doing pretty good this year. I would say I'm really happy where we are right now. I think, and I don't want to sugarcoat the fact that it hasn't always been like that. So I think you really have. Uh, I think it's extremely hard to keep everything together because it's not entirely clear when do you see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I think it's really I would have said it's really hard to get through that phase. Um, and I think I've been hearing that from other companies and founders, and I would say we're certainly no exception to that. I think right now we're in a fortunate position that, at least to some degree, right now, being not dependent on future investor bucks per se, since we're revenue positive, gives us a bit of a breather to really decide where are we going to take this company next. And I think that's a very, very energizing question to ask. And I think something that in some ways is also a little bit stressful because you cannot make not I mean, even if you don't make a decision on where to take the company next, you will make a decision by not doing anything really. So it's important now that we are moving very quickly and we're making our pace that we are really able to come up with what are we going to do next. Can we, if you think about it, with the success that we've been able to accomplish so far with those delivery platforms we managed to generate, the question is now perhaps less so, are we able to beat the existing off-the-shelf formulations that people are using to benchmark our technology. So maybe it's less of a question of that, than more of a question, can we beat our own formulations to justify our own internal R&D efforts to really try to do just that? I think how much more room do we have to get better than what we already are doing? And I think we like to think there is a lot more room there. There are a lot of additional opportunities in terms of oral exposure increase, trying to come up with formulations that are maybe also easier to be dosed in terms of having less restrictions. So there's certainly a lot more opportunities out there, my opinion. But we're going to have to actually walk the talk and prove that. So I think that is something that is going to be key. And separately, something that I think myself and others at Vivtex are very excited about is also that we want to look even beyond the drug delivery application and see how we can leverage our technology to potentially even help to create and engineer new drugs that are really designed from the start to be particularly amenable to oral delivery.
What year, I should have asked this at the beginning, but what year did Vivtex actually start up?
Oh, 2018.
2018. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're about 8 years in, I guess, at this point.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate ever doing any just internal non-partnered drug development? Is that something that you're considering?
Yes, we are actively doing that also.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's the way what we are trying to do. We have actually most of our efforts are internal. Um,
Oh, really?
because-
Okay.
yeah, because that is really where we are feeling we can advance our technology the most. Because we can really do this in a way that we control. Obviously, we are spending a lot of time and effort in building, expanding our data sets for AI modeling. So that's really something that we all do with internal R&D efforts. And when we think about new applications, what we like to do and actively are doing is we're trying to think of new applications, and then we try to do in a sort of stealth type setting. We run a program that sometimes takes 6 to 12 months to generate some data. We then test drive this with stakeholders, potential partners, and kind of based on that, then decide to build this out more broadly. So we have a number of these stealth programs, if you will, that have been going on now for some time, that are all internal, that are really intended right now to help us grow in the right direction in terms of building the platform capability.
That's excellent. Well, we're coming up on the end of our time, Thomas. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, but I wanted to ask as a final question what your top priorities are for 2026, and are you going to potentially be announcing some of those internal candidates this year?
Yeah, perhaps, it depends a little bit how far we're gonna take them. I think it depends sometimes whether or not it makes sense to just partner these as reformulation type products. But yeah, we currently actively trying to figure out, in what way makes it sense for us to further push these internal programs into, let's say, humans, or to partner them a little earlier. Could also be that we are doing a combination of those. But in terms of priorities, I think we are very excited and interested to look at the human translation. I think for us, we really would love the idea that we see multiple programs going in humans, and hopefully translating the way we predict. And I think to us, that would really mark a very, very big milestone for us. We've been obviously using our programs, we've been evaluating these in many different animal models. So there's always, there's obviously a good amount of de-risking that took place, but I think for ourselves and also for our partners, it's obviously going to be key to see how they translate in humans. And we really see that as a key aspect, because we're also using our platform with actual fully intact human GI tracts. So we're really trying to also ensure that human translation is happening in the most efficient way possible. So that's something that is a key priority for us. And then other than that, I think we really are eager to find the right partners, not just anyone, but really the right partners. And we really feel that right now, based on what we've seen with our data, there are a lot more programs out there that I think could really benefit from our technology. So we really hope to be able to partner with some of those select companies this year as well.
Well, it's a really interesting company, Thomas. Thanks again for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much, Ben, for having me.
We've been speaking with Thomas von Erlach, Ph.D., co-founder and CEO at Vivtex. I'm Ben Comer, and you've just listened to the Business of Biotech. Find us and subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts, and be sure to check out new weekly videocasts of these conversations every Monday under the Business of Biotech tab at lifescienceleader.com. We'll see you next week, and thanks as always for listening.